Hi, I'm Tyler Fertel, here joined by NCAA analyst, NBA contributor, and iHeart Radio sports anchor, Bill Herenda. Bill, thank you very, very much for joining me here today.
Tyler, it is my absolute pleasure. Another great part of the sports calendar with the NBA Finals upon us. So, yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and we have a lot of stuff to discuss today. You are obviously a man of many positions. There's a lot going on in the sports world today. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. And let's just jump right in here with that you started your career right after playing collegiate basketball at UMass Lowell. And now, obviously, you're an expert analyst and on the sport, an anchor, iHeart Radio, and consider yourself a contributor for the NBA in many different areas. So how important do you think it is to have a background in a sport before covering it professionally?
Yeah, I think it's vital, Tyler. And I think that, there are so many ways now to engage with your passion, regardless of what it is, right? What sport, music, entertainment, technology. And not only do you have the opportunity to get involved and engage in it, but you also have the ability to produce your own content. So I think this is really the golden era. But I do think, though, you have to have a real solid foundation in it. And one of the things I find myself going back to like all the time, Gordy Chiesa was a long time assistant coach with the Utah Jazz under the late Jerry Sloan. And he has a great expression where he says, the minute you think you know something, you realize you know nothing. And I think that's what keeps me in it, keeps me driven, because it's just so important to stay vital and to continue to learn. And I think that's really important to kind of build a foundation as you're emerging and evolving in your career, because I think I think people have a very keen sense of authenticity and being able to detect people's knowledge, their intentions, and just the overall vibe. So yeah, and I'm a big believer in the 10,000 hour rule. Malcolm Gladwell's rule of time engaged in, again, whatever pursuit it is, to really have a handle on it.
And do you ever find yourself really comparing your own personal basketball experiences to what you either see in the NCAA today or even at the NBA level, just kind of exploring that idea of contrasting, comparing what you learned on the court and what you're learning off the court as an analyst and anchor and observer?
Sure. And I think that, that's a great question, because you have the foundation of your experience. But I think it's important to remember that and to acknowledge it, but also not to cling to it and kind of let go of it, right? Because the game has changed so much. The athletes are, in my opinion, at least, so much better than a generation ago. The analytics, really, in every facet, everything has been accelerated and has improved so much that, yeah, I think it's important to remember and understand those feelings of what it felt like to win, what it felt like to lose, what it feels like to try to bounce. Because I think those are universal truths that will always be around. But I think we have to be careful not to just cling to, well, this is the way we did it. So I think it's good to acknowledge that, but also recognize this is like just an absolute new world of talent, coaching, training, management, ownership, all of those things.
And in the sports analysis and broadcasting industry, there has been a very large increase in the number of retired professional athletes that have really entered the field. And it's a lot about what you're talking about. It's not there. It's finding that balance between clinging to your past, but also providing valuable perspectives that really enhance the viewer's experience with the sport. So do you think that there will ever actually become a time where the non-experienced players and athletes still have access, or like don't have access, have minimal access to their current opportunities that are present in sports? Because as you see, like a lot of the color commentators and analysts are former players, and it's very interesting to get their perspectives, but still a lot of the anchors and a lot of reporters aren't experienced athletes. So what do you believe?
Yeah, yeah. So it's very interesting. I hearken back to Jeff Van Gundy when
Mm-hmm.
he was on Pat Riley's staff, and this story has been told on multiple platforms by Van Gundy himself, and it was like an end of the year review, right? The players
Mm-hmm.
go in for exit interviews, and as an assistant, Van Gundy was sitting down with Riley to do kind of his annual review after the season. And I think Pat Riley, paraphrasing the story, saw in Jeff a future NBA head coach.
Mm-hmm.
And Riley asks him about that. And I'm not even sure of what Jeff's response was, but I think
Mm-hmm.
what Riley's feedback was, what NBA players care about are you competent? Are you sincere? Are you reliable? And are you trustworthy?
Mm-hmm.
So if we use that paradigm and that lens of, well, an analyst can only be an ex-player, uh, obviously you don't have to be an ex-NBA player to be a head
Or
coach,
yeah, yes.
right? So I kind of think about that. I really feel as though, listen, there will always be a place for people that are prepared, yes, that have experience in the game in some fashion, it's in some way,
Mm-hmm.
and also that it's got to be entertaining, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably debunking that myth right now, killing your viewership, but I think there's a place for everyone that has the drive to be in it, and I really harken back again to that story because I'm not a big believer in putting a limit on what people can accomplish because I think
Mm-hmm.
it's really limitless, and I think there will always be a place for ex players, regardless if they were in the league for a cup of coffee or played freshman basketball or grammar school basketball. I think there will always be a place for anyone who is passionate about it, cares, puts in the time, is committed, and is fun to be with, right? Because I think
Uh-huh.
that's kind of what we're striving for in broadcasting is really this is as if we were watching this game uh, in someone's living room. And is this
Mm-hmm.
someone who would, pass that test? Like, yeah, I think this guy and this gal doing the game, I think they're great. I'd love to hang out with them. I
Uh-huh.
think at a very visceral level, I think that's kind of the bridge that we're trying to pass and get to together.
Mm-hmm. And to get you talked about how like those that don't play the sport should get to this point of expertise where they can be trustworthy for the listener or the viewer, where people want to listen to what they say and where they can feel confident in listening to what they say. So, for example, me, like I enjoy watching basketball, I enjoy watching football. I haven't played those sports at a competitive level. What do you think is the primary way to kind of gain your knowledge as you grow up to kind of get to a point where you can see yourself really thriving in a role in the sports industry?
Yeah, for example, uh, NBA TV has a show which I think is a great show, which is called NBA Finals Film Room.
Mm-hmm.
And last year and this year, thus far, as we're talking, Denver lost to Miami in Game Two
Mm-hmm.
of the finals. It's tied at the game apiece.
Mm-hmm.
So this year, it's been Sam Mitchell, Earl Watson are the analysts
Mm-hmm.
on that show.
Mm-hmm.
And I raise that because I find myself going to watch that show and taking notes
Uh-huh.
on the different points that Sam and Earl are making.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, back in the day, Frank Sinatra was a legendary entertainer,
Mm-hmm.
and I had the good fortune to see him live in concert, and he would always give credit to his composers, his arrangers, written by Rodgers and Hart, arranged by Nelson Riddle, conducted by Quincy Jones. He would always give credit. So if I'm going to use anything, I'm definitely going to give credit to that show and to Earl Watson or Sam Mitchell, whoever said it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's really important to be obsessed with learning and just keeping up with it, because there's so much out there that we can learn from. So, like, for example, I think if you're an aspiring broadcaster, and Tyler, I'm sure you do these things, you're watching NBA Finals film room, and as entertaining as Shaq and Charles and Kenny and Ernie are, they're the best. They're great. Uh, I think it's important also to have recorded the full Michael Malone post game presser, his thoughts. You know, what did Jokic have to say last night after a disappointing loss? What did Jimmy Butler have to say after a really hard fought down by 8 on the road NBA Finals on the verge of going down 2-zip, and they crushed it in the fourth quarter, made winning plays on both ends of the floor. So here, I think if you could just immerse yourself in the game, that's the best preparation. And I think, again, now we're in an era where so much information is out there that we can, collectively enjoy, share, learn from. I think that's the real key, is to just absorb as much information, and then also, then I think it becomes a function of how and where am I going to use this so that it's entertaining, it's fun, and that's, I think, a big part of broadcasting too, is learning that you're under. That's why podcasts are great, right? I can go on in this loquacious rant and what have you, but when you're on a show or you're doing a game, you have a finite window to fit in the information, and again, has to be information that's germane to the viewer and to what's happening, not just because you want to pontificate or impress your friends with something. So I think the key is really immerse yourself, learn, and just I always try to ask myself, hey, what have I learned today? What did I learn this week? What if I really? And again, here's another thing, Tyler. Like, I think to speak intelligently on things, like Nick Nurse's introductory press conference in Philadelphia, Bob Myers, his exit presser, right? Even though he's working until June 30th. What did Joe Lacob have to say at that? Those are all things that I think are really important. And so I think you just have to really immerse yourself to get there. You don't have to be Giannis or LeBron to to be a good broadcaster, but I think to glean as much as you can from those guys and the other folks that we talked about, and others, of course, is really paramount.
And talking more about really what you do in your job, is you are an analyst, you are an observer of both NCAA basketball and the NBA basketball, really looking at the different levels of the sport to kind of see where they compare, where they contrast once again, and how things are going in the sport. And I'm interested to know what your opinion is on the alternate ways of getting to the league. As, of course, someone that is probably encouraging people to stay in college, stay playing NCAA basketball, rather than go to places like the G League, Overtime Elite, overseas, all these different places. And now with NIL, it makes it even more complicated. What really is your opinion on how many ways there is to get to the NBA? Do you think it's good for the game, or would you prefer it to be more? I mean, obviously you can't limit it to just college anymore, but would you prefer for the best players to continue playing in college?
I think it really depends upon the player, Tyler. I think that each individual has unique skills, ability, talent, and circumstances. And I think that I'm all for players having options, and I think it's great that there are a multitude of options. And I think that it's just really important that young players have the right people around them to try to give them the guidance to get them to the next level. And there are so many opportunities to play professionally, with, of course, the NBA being the ultimate goal. So I think that answer really depends upon just, what country is someone living in? Uh, what is their skill level like? What's their family situation like? What's the what is the whole environment like that you have the ability to go to improve your game and to improve as a person, to uh, not only thrive on the floor but also off the floor. And there's so much that goes into it, right? That you gotta uh, uh, not only have the skill to get there, but also the discipline, the work ethic, the hunger, the desire, the luck in some cases. Where so I think it really depends. I think it's terrific because it is a global game, and again, there's so much information on how to get better, how to recover from injuries, how to recover in between workouts, in between games. But that's a tough question because I think it really depends upon everyone's is going to have some unique set of circumstances. And my hope, I just want everyone to succeed. As an analyst going to work in college games, doing the preparation, going to shoot around, meeting the coaching staffs and some of the players and what have you. I just want to see everyone succeed. So my hope is just that they find the right niche in the right environment so that they can improve and maximize their talent and ability.
Mm-hmm. And as we get into more maybe a conversation about the NBA draft, I'm curious what your stance is on kind of another controversial aspect of this is the age, the required age to really qualify for the NBA draft. There's been both conversations of it potentially being lowered or potentially being higher. Do you have a point of view on that? Or do you think it's good where it is?
I think it's likely that the age requirement is going to go away, and we'll see. We'll probably move away from the one and done, and that players will likely be able to go, directly from high school to the NBA. I think that's probably on the horizon, and I think that's, I think that's fine. People will talk about and kind of debate. Well, has the college game deteriorated because we have so many one and done players, and there's movement right amongst conferences, coaches, players, the transfer portal. So it's a much more fluid situation. But I would guess that the age requirement would likely go away, and I'm fine with that. I really am.
And I think that like you kind of just brought up, the college game is getting more and more interesting in terms of the quality of play compared to some of the other aspects again in the draft, such as the G League and overseas. I mean, this year in the 2023 NBA draft, it is very possible that 3 or 4 of the top 5 picks haven't played in college. And I think that is something that could be talked about.
I'm not sure what the exact percentage was on opening night this season of international players in the NBA. 25%. It seems like it's been around that number over the last couple of years. So, listen, I know your question was more, obviously international players play in college. Some of them do here before heading to the NBA. But I think this is just, a terrific milieu of talent rising to the top, regardless of the path, the circuitous Byzantine paths that some players take to get to the NBA. So I think it's everyone just kind of has to embrace their journey. But to your point, I think the college game is still very entertaining, and it's evolving, it's changing, it's more challenging for coaches, I believe, because of the fluid player movement due to the transfer portal. But it just, to me, it's all about just embracing it all, trying to learn as much as possible, and just trying to enjoy the game.
And what you basically just said about the whole transfer portal thing kind of just lit up an idea in my mind in terms of NIL and transfer portal and everything, and that also and all these alternate ways of getting in the NBA. It's all combining to become like every level from college to G League to overtime elite to overseas to the NBA. It's all becoming more as just strictly like a business for these players, for these prospects. And how do you think that the NCAA should try and refrain from that kind of idea becoming more and more true? Or is it kind of inevitable at this point for college basketball to become like a business for these NBA prospects?
Yeah, this Tyler is. I'm not sure if you've ever seen the movie Goodfellas, but there's a great scene in that movie where Paulie, they want to buy a restaurant,
Mm-hmm.
and they start explaining this to Paulie, and Paulie says, I don't know anything about a restaurant. I sit down, I have spaghetti and meatballs, and I enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
So, to me, I think you could say that I'm just more in the moment,
That's fair.
at the game. And, obviously, I think you could say that the NCAA, college basketball has always been a business, but a lot of that stuff is just, to me, I'm just kind of operating more in the moment and
Mm-hmm.
just, having fun with the games. And in other words, you'll know from this conversation, I have not applied to become the chairperson of the NCAA. That's not going to be me. That's not in my future. So there is certainly, the ripple effect of the global game, and it has an impact on every, on every level for sure. There's no question about that. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And kind of moving more towards this idea of the NBA draft. I mean, it's coming up soon. The lottery happened a couple weeks ago. I'm guessing you were very invested in that, as it was the race for Victor Wembanyama and then also Scoot Henderson essentially at 2. And so the NBA draft is something that is becoming increasingly interesting, with more movement of players around the league, with more trades occurring, with free agents leaving more often. So how important do you think the NBA draft continues to be in a franchise's improvement and development?
Yeah, so it's very important. No question about it. There are really only four ways in the NBA to get better, right? It's the draft, skill development, trades, and free agency in no particular order.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I think about too is, how about guys that have gone undrafted?
Mm-hmm.
So how about like Fred VanVleet, Christian Wood, Lou Dort, Austin Reeves,
Austin
a
Reeves.
player that you're familiar with?
Very.
How many guys, right, on Miami alone,
Oh,
from Strus to
incredible.
Martin to Vincent, Udonis Haslam, who's been with them forever, and I know Duncan Robinson. I may be
Duncan Robinson.
forgetting one or two other guys with the Heat. Uh, so yeah, I think it's the draft's vitally important. There's no question about that. But again, it's just one of four ways, and I think it's always important to stay even keel, not too high, not too low, and
Mm-hmm.
recognize that the draft, yeah, it's important, but it's really just one way to get better. And it is a time when uh, front offices are, you know under the microscope, if you will, because it's a big time, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And I really have a lot of respect for, anyone who's in the talent evaluation business, because it's not easy. And of course, whatever happens in the draft, Tyler, right, it's going to take a little bit of time to really get a read on how well a team did in this particular draft.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that Wembanyama seems to be a very unique player with,
Mm-hmm.
an unreal skill set. Uh, I have not seen him live. I've only seen him, on tape. I haven't seen him live.
Uh-huh.
But I think also there in his development, it's interesting to look at Giannis, for example, and Durant, and what their bodies were like coming into the NBA and what they look like now. So I think that'll be a big part of Wembanyama's development, is just the
Mm-hmm.
strength and conditioning, endurance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's going to live up to the hype. And of
Wow.
course, you always have to hope that, like UB Brown says, the best ability is availability. So
Yes.
of course, you hope that God forbid, injuries are the worst part of the game. So you
Mm-hmm.
hope that players stay healthy. So yeah, so I love the draft. It's great, but I just think it's important to recognize that it's just one way to get better, and also there are a lot of undrafted guys that have had terrific careers or are having terrific
I mean,
careers
yeah.
as well.
I mean, another guy that I don't think you mentioned is, for example, Isaiah Thomas, who he's a guy that came into the league, didn't get him any eyes, under 6 feet, and then he comes into the league and he's beating players much larger than him, and it's just not something that very many people could see. Great thing to see is undrafted players succeeding, and like you're talking about, availability is the biggest thing. Zion Williamson needs to hear that right about now, because I've said for the past like 2 or 3 years he should win MVP, and then he doesn't play more than 40 games, and it's just another one of those things. It's like you're saying, injuries are the worst part of the game, and it's not specifically close. But in relation to this idea of undrafted players, for example, you mentioned Gabe Vincent dropped over 20 points in the NBA Finals game last night on the way to the Heat, winning that game on the road. With G League programs being more established, I mean, I think now every NBA team has one. I think the last one might have been added this year. Do you think that the NBA draft could potentially be expanded to one or two more rounds because they have these like lower programs that are allowing them more spots on their roster? Or do you think that leaving it at 2 rounds and allowing the valuability of undrafted players staying as it already is, do you think that is in the better interest of the NBA?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say, Tyler, from a player's perspective, that I would rather it stay at 2 rounds. And here's why. While you won't be able to tell your grandkids that you were drafted in the 3rd round or what have you, you have the ability to perhaps find the best fit for you being undrafted, as opposed to you're drafted, this team owns your rights, and you're kind of locked in. So I remember the days. I had one of my brother's teammates at Merrimack College, Joe Dixon, was drafted by the Boston Celtics, I think in like the 6th or 7th round. Wow. Back in like the mid 80s. So, which is a while ago. But so I think there's a good balance here with the draft, the way it's composed, to keep players' options open if they go undrafted. And of course, a lot of these things too becomes part of the CBA and negotiated the collective bargaining agreement between the players union and the league. So so I think this is good. I think there's a good balance with where the draft is at now, the way it's composed.
I mean, yeah, I think it's a good observation. For example, with Austin Reeves, another player you mentioned, who knows if he would have developed like this if he didn't get the opportunity to play with LeBron James and this Lakers organization. I mean, you're very right. Choosing the best fit for you is a vital aspect to your NBA career for sure. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and also Tyler, Wes Wilcox, who's now part of Monty McNair's team in Sacramento as assistant GM. I've heard him talk about the fact that not only do you have to identify players, but you have to develop them, but then there's got to be the opportunity. So, it's player development, skill development is huge. It's really important, and also I think that for players to have the mobility to maneuver and to find the right scenario for them and the right scenario for that particular team and franchise is something that's been really fun to watch. And you see it, you hear, Jeff Van Gundy talk so highly about the G League and the players in it, the coaches in it. And again, we don't have time, but, so many players have, come via the G League in some way, shape, or form, right? And so many coaches, we talked about Nick Nurse earlier, and that's the beauty of it, right? I mean, just Spoelstra starts. Frank Vogel just got the Phoenix job. Some of these people started in the film room and what have you, and so it's really fun to watch people's careers evolve.
I think development is a very underrated aspect of the NBA franchise. I don't think it's talked about nearly as much because, like you said, you can draft players, you can sign people's undrafted player or undrafted free agents, but there's no guarantee they'll be good. And you see in the NBA now more than ever, it's a lot of hit or miss in terms of these rookies and second year players that you're really picking up. So yeah, interesting aspect to the league. And you just mentioned the Sacramento Kings. You are a former insider on them. And they had arguably the most surprising season out of any NBA team this year. I mean, Mike Brown won Coach of the Year for leading the team to the number 3 overall seed. De'Aaron Fox won Clutch Player of the Year. So I asked your friend Ben Gumpert a pretty similar question here, but do you think that the Kings organization is back, and have they solidified themselves as a future contender in the Western Conference, or how do you think they can do that?
Yeah. So this is really what's tricky. Kings had a great season. Totally agree, Tyler. Kind of came out of nowhere. And, Keegan Murray was a great pick, right? He was terrific for them. Herder, that was a great acquisition. And like you said, the emergence of Fox and Sabonis. And, I certainly didn't like to see Halliburton go. But that trade is really looks like it's helped both teams, both the Kings and the Pacers. So, a lot of times, like Steve Clifford is the head coach of the Charlotte Hornets. And Spoelstra, I think, may have said this last night, but a lot of times you are judged in the NBA on how you perform in the postseason. But that depends upon where your franchise is in their arc of winning, in their arc of development. So now Sacramento is in my opinion, in a precarious place, and here's why: because they overachieved, they had a great year, and certainly tremendous fan base.
Yeah.
And to get back in the playoffs, the last time they were in the playoffs prior to this season, the iPhone hadn't been released, right? That's a long time. So now the expectation is they're, like you said, they're back, So I think I have a lot of confidence in Wes Wilcox in the front office and what they're doing there. But I just think that I think the best way to say it is that I'm sure Monty McNair, Wes Wilcox, Alvin Gentry, those guys, maybe they sleep like babies. They wake up every couple of hours crying because you recognize how competitive it is. Houston, even the teams at the bottom, Houston, San Antonio with Wembanyama. And you also have to look at it and say, well, how are we going to compete with Phoenix, with a healthy Clipper squad?
Yeah.
With LeBron, there's going to be a lot of roster turnover, of course, with the Lakers.
Yeah.
How are we going to compete with them? We're not going to sneak up on anybody next year, in my opinion. If we're Sacramento, people are going to be ready for us. So I think it's a great situation for the Kings to be in because they're relevant. They were one of the best stories in the NBA, a real feel-good story, and also I think a real reason for folks to tune in every night on NBA League Pass. They're so entertaining. So, but I think here it's very important not to get complacent. Like, we've arrived or we're back. So I think there's certainly a good chance that they're set up with a core that can be a consistent playoff team. I certainly think they need to get better defensively. I think they need some physicality. And certainly there are some people, in the free agent market that will be very attractive to them. They've got a big decision to make on Harrison Barnes there. But anyway, so I think it's kind of a long-winded way of saying stay humble, stay hungry. I think maybe an off-season mantra for the Kings and probably a lot of teams as well.
And yeah, they're in that situation if they're succeeding, but they're also very young. So it's like, you love to win, you love to develop your players, and why not do both at the same time? I mean, it's almost obviously not going to have a high draft pick this year, but still almost a dream season for the Kings, just kind of reestablishing their organization and allowing them to develop their players in a winning manner. And you talked about the fan base. Fan base was tremendous. Broke the sound barrier multiple times throughout the season. Those clips were mind-boggling. But as a fan, do you think that "Light the Beam" is the cool slogan in the NBA? I mean, is it even close?
Yeah, it's just tremendous. It really is. It absolutely is. And that whoever developed that, really should have some type of free pass at the best restaurants in Sacramento, right?
Uh-huh.
Because yeah, that was just tremendous, just a stroke of genius. It's really a lot of fun. That was great.
Hmm. And we've talked a little about all the different things you've kind of juggled throughout your careers, being starting with actually playing and then getting more into the viewership side and analytical side. But you also have a podcast called Herenda's Agenda, where you've brought on some amazing guests, such as Hall of Fame quarterback Joe Namath, which is extremely cool. And you've also made appearances through your podcast on the Dave Smith Show, and then you also provided sports updates, especially on the NBA, of course. So what do you appreciate most about having these wider opportunities to kind of share your content and give your opinions on sports? And what do you think it's going to be like going forward? And how's this industry going to continue to change as there are all these social media platforms? And for example, your podcast is on SoundCloud. Like how is this industry changing as more and more people can get involved?
Yeah, it's amazing, Tyler, isn't it? I mean, I can remember the days of like you'd play in high school and how your team did, right? And I can remember calling the Jersey Journal or the Hudson Dispatch and getting scores on other games. This is
Uh-huh.
crazy to think of that, to think you had to do that. So yeah, I think now it's just going to continue evolve and change. Of course, I'm not sure when the NBA broadcasting rights when they come up, but you hear things about Amazon getting involved in Apple, right? And we see that with other sports, right? With Major League Baseball, uh, Apple TV has a game of the week or something like that, and we see Amazon getting into the mix as well. So yeah, I think it'll just keep evolving, uh, and the sports broadcasting landscape, it will continue to be ubiquitous. That
Mhm.
the viewer will have choices and so many games to watch and to choose from, as far as not only watching but also listening. I still love listening to games if I'm
Uh-huh.
out walking or driving. I really still enjoy the radio experience a
Mhm.
ton. Uh, not only as a listener but as a broadcaster. So, and I think for me, I just enjoy whatever it is I'm doing at that particular point in time. If I'm working on iHeart updates, I want to just do the best job I can with that. If I've got a game like this year is fortunate enough to work some FS1 games, like whether it's Arizona hosting Washington or UCLA at Utah. I just want to do the best I can in that particular moment. I really kind of enjoy each of the things that I'm doing. It's just
Mhm.
hanging out with you is great. It's almost like I enjoy breakfast, I enjoy lunch, I enjoy dinner, I enjoy a cup of coffee, and that's how I kind of view those things. I just feel really fortunate to be able to be in the mix and to be doing them, and really, we talked about this being a golden age really for players, for coaches, and I think it is for broadcasting as well. And I'm just as excited as the next person to watch this thing evolve and just kind of hang on and enjoy and have fun with it.
Mhm. And you talked a little bit about covering some Pac-12 this year. Is it this upcoming year? If you have to give your prediction, is it Arizona? Is it full with adding Caleb Love? Is that it?
I don't know, man. Oh man, I just think it's so hard to predict. Tyler, with the transfer portal,
That's
and
fair.
really, I'm so immersed in kind of like in the NBA Finals right now that
That's fair. That's
I'm
fair.
not sure. I did dream before the NBA season that Denver was going to win it,
Wow.
and so I'm going to stick with that.
That's
So
still
I'll
your
get on.
prediction?
Still my prediction. And you mentioned my work with NBC Sports California, and I was there when Michael Malone's second. Well, the season Michael Malone was fired, I worked there,
Mhm.
and I really have a lot of respect for him. Uh, and so I'll stick with Denver
Mhm.
as my pick to win the whole thing.
Mhm.
However, over the past 20 years, we've only had one NBA champion outside of the top 10 in defensive rating, and that the Warriors were 11th
Uh-huh.
in 2018. And this season, Denver regular season numbers 15th, Miami 9th. So
Yeah.
Denver would kind of be outside of the top 10. But I'll go there. Maybe next time we talk, I'll have the Pac-12 prediction for you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much the defensive rating is really affecting the Nuggets because Nikola Jokic is putting up triple doubles every game. So it's hard to lose when you have that happening. I mean, the reason Jokic had 40 points and over 10 rebounds last night, obviously not a triple double, but he had to make up for the scoring of Jamal Murray. So if Murray scores and Jokic gets triple doubles, it doesn't seem like they're going to lose as well as the Heat plays. But we'll see, right?
Yeah, we'll see. Here's another thing to watch for, and the aforementioned Gordy Chiesa and guys like UB Brown. They talk about this frequently in the NBA playoffs, not always, but frequently. The teams that win these games are scoring more points from the free throw line extended and below in the fourth quarter.
Mm-hmm.
It's something to think about. And also, are they getting stops? Like Denver entered the fourth quarter last night up 8, and they were outscored 36-25. Mm-hmm. How many times did they foul a 3-point shooter, right? They kind of didn't follow the mantra of defending without fouling, and they just didn't make winning plays on both ends of the floor. Mm-hmm. So you're right, Tyler. You've got to be able to score in today's game. But also being able to defend and also being able to make key defensive plays, limiting your opponent to one shot only, the cardinal rule of the NBA playoffs, according to UB Brown. Can you control your defensive board? Mm-hmm. And so there's so much balance that's necessary to win. So I'm really excited for Wednesday night for Game 3. It's going to be all these games are prodigious, right?
I mean, yeah. It's such a good matchup. I mean, we saw Bam Adebayo have his game of the season last night, which was one of the main reasons why the Heat won. And this is a series where I don't really care who wins because they're both great teams. They're both fun to watch. They both have their storylines. And so it's fun observing it for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. It's great stuff.
And then to kind of end, we talked a lot about advice that you've given or advice that you've gotten and really everything. But what would overall be your advice to someone that is just wants to enter the sports industry, whether it's as a player, a coach, an analyst, an anchor, a broadcaster, whatever it is? What do you have to say to anyone that is really looking to enter sports?
Yeah, I would say just get involved at whatever capacity you can, and just get involved, enjoy it, learn from the people around you, and you know how it goes. You go to high school games, and there's a TV truck there. They're producing a game. Don't be shy. Introduce yourself. Roll up your sleeves, and I think that's the most important advice I could give. Really, is just to get involved and follow your heart, and just you'll find your path. So I think that I also think it's important too to do the best job in what you're doing right now. Mm-hmm. So you may not work the Final Four your first season, but mm-hmm. Just I think to be, or you may not even start in the job that you ultimately want, but I think also recognizing that there's so much that you can learn from any role that you fulfill. Mm-hmm. That's going to help you when you are the play-by-play guy or the mm-hmm. analyst or the update anchor, because all those experiences you'll be able to really understand how everything comes together and how important it is that the people are to making these radio broadcasts and these TV productions of games and shows. I think it just gives you a really good global perspective. So I would just get involved in any capacity whatsoever. If it's audio, video, cameraman, just doing anything to contribute, because ultimately that's going to carry you a long way in understanding how things get done, understanding different roles of the producer, the director, the courtside or sideline reporter, all those things. It's just going to make you better down the road. And I think it's just really important to take advantage, in the best sense of the term, to just take any opportunity and run with it. So I guess that's the advice I would have, is just get involved. There's so many ways to get involved these days as well. You can produce your own stuff and create your own content. So I think that's what I would encourage people to do.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Mr. Herenda, thank you very, very much for coming on today. It's been an honor. It's been a privilege. I already feel like I know sports better than I did before, and I appreciate it.
Oh, it was my pleasure, Tyler. Anytime. Thanks
All
for
right.
having me.